Howdy, Joseph.
Hi, hello, how are you?
We heard the news,
We're quite enthused.
and the only thing to do
What should we do?
is strum this guitar
And sing to the stars.
and serenade you.
You survived, and that's true. I thought I'd send a little wish to you.
That is some mighty fine fiddling. But hey, let's pick it up.
All right.
That's more like it. Yeehaw!
Play it for Joseph.
All right, now where were we? Okay, you're still standing, and that's pretty great.
Joseph!
You know what? You kicked his butt. It's time to celebrate.
Joseph!
Wurzel jingle jangle.
It's time to do-si-do.
So grab yourself a partner and let's see go.
Cause it's a
Jingle jangle here and a jingle jangle there. A jingle jangle inspiration everywhere. A jingle jangle here and a jingle jangle there.
a jingle jangle inspiration everywhere.
All right.
Joseph Jaffe is not famous. I'm famous. Joseph Jaffe is a delusional human being who thinks he's famous. He's not famous. He's not famous. I'm famous.
We are human, we are animals, we crave the ability to be we. I know it's called me Andes. We Andes might have sounded differently, right?
Is it a disco now?
Yeah, it's an after party, so it's now we go with the flash.
My goal in life is to be a laptop sticker.
Me too.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.
It's a great honor, Mr. Jaffe. It's always nice to be with you.
I'm so happy to be with you. I'm honored.
Thanks for doing this too. It's a real service to the community.
What a great organization and a show that offers hope, optimism, creative solutions, entertainment.
Thank you for doing this, Joseph. It's your gift to the universe, and it's appreciated.
Very human, and I like that.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're insane!
Look, I am not famous. I am Joseph Jaffe, your host. The Mooch is maybe infamous. Is he famous? He says he's famous. Maybe he's infamous. I don't know. Maybe he's going to have to come on the show and defend himself, damn it. Brian Piper is here. He said, looking forward to this conversation. Love the media bias chart and Vanessa's channel. So, Vanessa, you have a fan already in Brian Piper. I am so excited for this conversation. We will get into that soon. But we are we're live and we're here at a special time. It is 5 o'clock somewhere. Actually, it's 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, but it is 7 p.m. where I am, which means I have my grape juice, my adult grape juice, if I need it, if the conversation gets too intense. And you know what? It is a serious conversation. It is a needed conversation. It is a necessary conversation. And we are going to have it here. Glenn says, are you really live today? I was fooled yesterday. Yes, the pre-recorded. I actually did say that it was pre-recorded, although sometimes I am able to fool you. But yes, it is 7:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. How else can I prove to you? I suppose I could do that, right? 7:04, kind of, whatever, if you could read that. But yes, we are live, which means many, many wonderful things. First of all, just to remind you, that we are now on the Marketing Podcast Network. You can listen to the show in audio if you truly do believe that I have a face for radio. Yes, that joke will never get old, even though I'm getting older by the day. But you can listen to this. Just go and search Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous wherever podcasts are found, and listen to your heart's content. Other things to tell you, well, you know that you can win stuff. I like to reward and recognize my live viewers. So right now in the Discord channel, bit.ly/notfamous Discord, because a not famous host deserves a not famous Discord. You can go and click on the airdrop, which is live for the next hour, and you will get some Jaffe coin. Also, if you do subscribe to the show's channel, which I hope you do, and I also hope you subscribe to Vanessa's channel, more on that soon and more on that shortly, you'll have an opportunity to win a whole bunch of things. One of the things, he has just a screenshot to show you that there is a giveaways channel where you can actually claim your airdrop. And if you go and find the post, you will see that we are going to be giving away an NFT every single week. That's a little bit of alpha breaking news. An NFT every single week to the show's viewers, listeners, etc. And all you have to do there is just paste your subscriber name, and you will be eligible, my friends. Well, let's get into the reason why you're here, because it isn't for me. It's definitely for Vanessa Otero. Vanessa is the founder and CEO of Ad Fontes Media, which she says to me is Latin, and I wouldn't know, because if I had done Latin at school, no doubt I would have flunked it without question. But Vanessa she's doing God's work, if I may say, the Lord's work, by trying to rectify what is an awful sin, which is the ridiculousness that happens in our mainstream media today. Mainstream, off-stream, against the stream, crossing the stream, I don't care, until we eliminate bias or figure out a way to disclose the bias. We are going to be in big trouble, and we're going to have to change that. And then, of course, on Friday, you're going to meet Hashlips himself, Mr. Daniel Botha, who is the founder of the Sketchy Ape Book Club, SABC. And of course, I hope we'll be giving away one of his amazing NFTs. Well, let's get into our seated soliloquy. And the soliloquy, I just got tongue-tied with my own soliloquy, and I haven't even started drinking the daddy juice yet. But it is something that I think about a lot. I may have alluded to it in the past, but I wanted to reprise this idea, especially with Vanessa coming on the show, and I cannot wait actually to hear her thought. So, you know, and I'm not joking, about 10 years ago, maybe more, I came up with an idea. I came up with many ideas to be able to, let's just say, prove when a politician's lying. And you all know the joke. How do you know a politician's lying? When they open their mouths. But I was so frustrated with the spin. I was so frustrated with the fact that the same fact, the same insight could actually be spun differently by two different people. And, you know, and sometimes it was as stark as the sky is red, the sky is blue, and you would have arguments in favor and against, etc., etc. And so I thought to myself, there is a term which we will discuss, I'm sure, called fisking, which, interestingly enough, has origins from the far right, but that shouldn't confuse us. But the idea is, how do you debunk? How do you determine in real time, perhaps, when a fact is being distorted, when misinformation is being delivered, when misdirection is happening? And I thought, well, why couldn't we use augmented reality? And this was 10 years ago. You know, this is before fake news and truthiness and alternative facts became part of our lexicon. What if there was a layer that you could use your phone, or even with an interactive television, be able to in real time have the community or have an independent body being able to determine degrees of truth, degrees of lies, and even come up with a score. Now, I had other ideas as well, which is to attach electrodes that would deliver 10,000 volts of electricity to any politician or host of mainstream media when in fact they were lying. That might be a little bit extreme for you, but these were the ways that I was thinking of being able to use technology, right? Use innovation, use the community in this Web3 world that we live in this crowdsourcing, wisdom of crowds world from Web2, why can't we come up with a solution that actually says, you know what, it's not okay to be able to dupe the paying public, or maybe even the public that aren't paying. Just because they aren't paying doesn't mean they deserve to be duped. I want to leave you just with a thought Bob Garfield once said, which is, according to research, 50% of the population is dumber than the other half. It has been statistically proven. And the reality is, if that is true, and it is true, that means 1 in every 2 people is open to being duped, fooled, misdirected, swayed, biased in favor or against. And it is time for us now to rise up. It is time for us to draw a line. It is time for us to say, no more, no more. Steve Garfield is here on LinkedIn, and he said, the only way I can think of fact-checking the media in real time is to use Twitter with a hashtag. Well, I'm sure there are many, many ways that we can do that. And now it's time to actually bring in an expert, or at least someone that is doing something about it. I'm talking about Vanessa Otero. Vanessa Otero is the creator of the Media Bias Chart and the founder and CEO of Ad Fontes Media. Alarmed by the unhealthy state of the media ecosystem, Vanessa used her expertise in content analysis to create the original Media Bias Chart in 2016. I wonder what was going on in 2016. Then in 2018, she founded Ad Fontes Media to fulfill the need revealed by the popularity of the chart, namely to meet the demand for a map to help people navigate the complex media landscape and for comprehensive content analyses of media sources themselves. Let's welcome her to the show. Vanessa, welcome to Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
You know, something that just strikes me is that in going through your bio, you actually created a company to fulfill a chart. I don't think that I can't think of an example where that's ever happened, where a chart, a Lumascapes, etc., actually birthed a company. That's amazing.
Yeah, you know, it's a really interesting origin story of our company, because I was practicing as a patent attorney, and I just really wanted to talk to my friends and family about how some news sources are better, some are worse. It's not just a simple like real news, fake news binary. Some sources are left and right, and some sources are really extremely so. And I just thought, yeah, I'm a big nerd. You know, I love Latin. I took it in middle school and high school. I named my company a Latin name. I really just I love words and rhetorical analysis. I was an English major. I was in the practice of law. So, you know, I just analyzed news sources, created a chart, because I knew that, you know, pictures, as they say, are worth 1,000 words, and that it could convey something about complex ideas really quickly. It really surprised me how viral it went. That really caught me off guard, because I literally just wanted to talk to my friends about it, and it became an all-consuming project, side project, for a couple of years. And I just realized that there was an underlying need there. You know, working in the Denver Boulder startup community, I knew that if there's like a need, and the people are asking for something, that there could be a business there. And that's why I started the company.
Well, we're going to get to that shortly. Steve Garfield says, is this the media bias chart I see all the time? Let us see the chart. You're just going to have to wait a wee bit longer, and I'm pretty sure it is the one that you're used to seeing. There you go. You know there is only one bias chart, but
there are imitators. There are imitators out there.
Exactly.
But if you Google it, I mean, the different versions that we've had over the years, it's like the vast majority of that stuff is from me and my company now.
You might need to NFT it, and then the smart contract will verify that in fact it is authentic. But Vanessa, it is National Opposite Day, and I was thinking how perfect, right? When we have the left and the right, when we have these various points of view that literally might be celebrating National Opposite Day every single day, different versions of reality. So there you go. Hopefully you are celebrating National Opposite Day by maybe challenging yourself to understand the opposing point of view as opposed to being contrarian about it. And we'll get rid of the frivolity. Is that even a word?
Yeah.
Because, there you go. One fun fact about you: when you're not creating viral media bias charts and creating companies to serve a chart, we found out through our private investigators that dug deep into your life that your deadlift PR is 325 pounds. I don't even know
Indeed.
cumulatively in my entire life that I've ever lifted 325 pounds. But we actually have a photo of you. There you go. Is that 325
There it is.
pounds?
It looks like it.
You're not even breaking a sweat.
And my hair looks just so perfect in that picture. So.
Isn't it just? But how important do you still lift?
Yes. I was part of a CrossFit gym for a long time. I have a little home gym, still love to lift weights, and deadlift is just like my favorite lift. So.
But how important is your hobby, and especially lifting, for you in terms of mental health, in terms of creating a boundary or even just a separation from the day to day and from the challenges and pressures, and now at such a highly visible level as well?
Oh, it's incredibly important. And, I really started, developing working out every day as a habit, or at least like 5 days a week. About over 10 years ago, when I was still in law school, and actually went to law school in the evening. I was my day job was as a sales rep. That was my previous career, and I was very, very busy. But I started noticing that I wasn't having couldn't eat the same things and like stay the same weight anymore as I was getting older. And I was like, I need to start working out. We actually started with P90X videos, and we actually did those at home, and like stuck with it, and developed that habit, and then got into Insanity and CrossFit and things like that. And it's the habit of it is extremely important, and developing that habit is very difficult. It's one of the difficult habits to start and maintain if you are not in that already. But it's like crucial to having balanced mental health in my life. And because it's a habit, it's easier to maintain. It's easy for me to take off the headset, go downstairs to my home gym, and just get in, even if it's a quick workout every day.
Well, we will not be showing that photo again. Brad, who introduced the two of us, is probably going, seriously, this is what you're showing? She is going to be irate with me.
No.
But let's reveal the chart, and let's see if Steve Garfield was correct, which he probably is. And I wish I could make the chart slightly larger, but maybe people can lean into the screen. So tell us about the, let's go back to the creation of the chart. I think you set it up a little bit at the beginning in terms of why you created the chart, and tell people what they're seeing.
Right. So there's two axes, obviously the vertical and the horizontal one. And the vertical one is categories of reliability. So like news value and reliability is what we're measuring. We have a really specific definition of reliability, like what can you rely on for news to be well and thoroughly informed. And so what we have at the apex of the chart, the very top, is the work that journalists do, because work that journalists do is the most important thing, going out and getting the news sources. Now, in thinking about what makes a news source good and what makes a news source bad, but what makes a news source okay and in the middle, there's a lot to it, right? So it's not as simple as news versus opinion. We like to separate news into categories of things that are binary. It's just not sufficient. It's not just news versus opinion, and it's not just real versus fake, right? So at the very top, you've got fact reporting. And below that, there's still some really high reliability sources, but they've got more analysis. So things that are analysis and fact reporting are just below that. And below that, there are strictly analysis news sources. Those aren't necessarily bad at all, but they're not as much. They're not as dense with like newly reported factual news items. Then below that, you have opinion, and that gradient really starts to shake out in terms of, the more you get closer to opinion, the less actual facts there are, the more opinions and inferences and statements of meaning and conclusions there are. But a lot of our news landscape is that kind of content. It's people's hot takes, it's pundits, it's people's predictions on what's going to happen, and that's not exactly news. It's news-like content. And then below that, we have categories of how news sources start to be unreliable. And it's not just simple fake news. We have a category that's selective, incomplete, unfair persuasion, propaganda, or other issues. That's one like a problematic category. And so much of our news landscape falls there as well. It can really lead people down rabbit holes. So then you have misleading information below that, and inaccurate and fabricated info below that. That's really where the fake news would reside. And on the left-right bias, this is a contemporary U.S. left to right political bias spectrum. In the middle, we call it the middle, not that it's neutral or that it's unbalanced. Everything has a bias because everything's, news sources are all created by humans, but those represent things that are minimally balanced or centrist bias or a balance of biases. And middle is not necessarily like the best or most morally correct by any means. Like you can have low reliability sources that are in the middle. And then out from there, you have things that are skew left and right, hyperpartisan left and right, and most extreme left and right. So this is really this is not like a polynomial graph. It's not a bell curve, even though it's like it's shaped that way. There's just there's a strong but imperfect correlation between the bias of news sources and their reliability in general, but not always. So we just plot those two dimensions on this chart, and that's how we come up with the media bias chart.
I have so many questions, and and I think the first one is you would have thought maybe a short while ago that just the description, which is analysis or high variation in reliability, would be the bottom of the barrel, which is the most we could tolerate. Wait a second, there's a high variation in reliability. And then we get to opinion or high variation in reliability, and then we start going to selective. I mean, it's incredible that we then get lower to contains misleading info, and then lower to contains inaccurate, fabricated info. How did we get here? How did we stoop so low?
Well, there are a lot of competing incentives at play in the media ecosystem. I mean, there's a lot of news sources in the first instance. I mean, the news landscape as it is today is so different from what it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago and 40 years ago. So you've got in the folks can remember. I remember days when there were 3 major television news networks. There were your major print, national, and local papers, and there was the tabloids and the entertainment things on the supermarket stand. Right, that's not a ton of news sources. And then in the 80s and 90s, you started having cable, 24-hour cable news for the first time, and then partisan cable 24-hour news like Fox and MSNBC, and then of course the internet came, and then there's the barrier of entry to publishing became much lower. The digital transformation, or newspapers having to go online, their business models getting disrupted, etc. But then in the 2010s, a real accelerating shift took place. It was not only that there were so many news sources online, it's that all of a sudden they were available on smartphones, on social media apps, on the smartphones. And so you have it instantly available and fed to you algorithmically. So now most people's news habits are formed by, they're not, most people are not making choices about the news that they consume every day on an active basis. They either go to 3 or 4 or 5 different news sources based on habit, and often those habits were formed by algorithm. Like you're presented a bunch of news articles. Like when I first started creating the media bias chart, I noticed that I had fallen into, I had liked some articles on Vox and Slate. And so those were like news sources I just checked every day. And I wouldn't see hardly any of the other news sources. And I had just really developed a habit around those. And I figured that wasn't good. Like I'm not actively selecting to choose from all the possible information sources that are out there. And we get into these filter bubbles really easily without even realizing it.
As I said, I have so many questions. So when I asked you how did we get here, I guess it was rhetorical, but you gave me a fantastic answer. So I say blame Mark Zuckerberg clearly, right? Because everybody, it's so easy. But it's technology, it's social media. I found this quote for you. I always try and find one quote for my guest, and this was the one that I found for today's conversation. The pen had been mightier than the sword, but then the tongue took over. And I think this is Amit Abraham said this quote. This the sensationalism of news, the creation of public personas, rock stars, personal brands that produced, and I love this word from you, news-like content. I like that. It's like truthiness as well. Something Vanessa that I just picked up a while ago, which is, and I'd say to people, once I tell you this, you will never be able to unthink it or unsee it or unhear it. Listen to how many times you hear on a CNN or on a Fox News the phrase, I think. I think. And you realize that it's all just that. It's opinion. It's not fact. And even worse, sometimes it's opinion of a fact or so talk a little bit about how the tongue has taken over from the pen. And I guess part two, I mean, these are not small questions. Is journalism dead?
Well, I'll answer an emphatic no to the last question, and but how the tongue has taken over. So there, like I said, there's incentives to create content, especially if you're not a big publisher. If you're a new publisher, it's a very competitive landscape, right? Look how many YouTube channels, look how many podcasts, look how many internet sites. And one of the cheapest and easiest ways to gain an audience is to create outrage content, and that drives clicks and views, and it drives engagement on social media, and subsequently it becomes easy to monetize when you can develop a large audience that way. And so many people have taken advantage of those monetary incentives. I mean, there's advertising dollars flow towards misinformation, towards extreme polarizing content, often without the brands knowing, and sometimes if they do know, they don't necessarily even care, right? So there's layers of problems and layers of incentives here. I mean, people talk about a fragmented media landscape. I mean, yeah, to say the least, it's fragmented, and people have their own audiences, and content creators of these news-like publications have sometimes very loyal fan bases, which is appealing to, say, podcast advertisers. Never mind that they're loyal to somebody who's spewing election disinformation, right? They're loyal, and they can sell products. So because it's a fragmented media landscape, not everybody knows what's going on in other parts of the media landscape. Like if you're somebody on the right, you usually never listen to or watch news content from the left unless it's through the view of somebody on your own side on Twitter. Like one of the personalities you follow makes fun of something on the left and says, look how ridiculous the left is, right? And that's your view of left-leaning media. And same thing on the right. Like nobody on, if you're on the left, you usually don't sit there and watch Fox News for hours, but you will have heard about the most egregious thing that was said on one of the primetime shows through the lens of somebody on your own side. So we have very skewed, altered views of like what the other side is listening to, because we all have limited time to listen to it. But to your second question, like, is journalism dead? No, I mean, journalism is crucial. It's fundamental, and it's going through some, ever since the digital transformation that I mentioned earlier about, news going online, the news industry has wrestled with its changing business model, right? Paywalls and advertising, and this again goes back to the dynamics and the incentives. You've got lots of ad dollars flowing towards misinformation and extreme polarizing information. However, some advertisers realize, oh, well, we don't want to be associated with that. And how do we tell? Like, how do we make sure that we're not associated with extreme political content? Well, let's just not advertise on the news at all. And that's terrible, because that's defunding great journalism. And so, we want to strike a balance where brands have a responsibility to support good journalism. It's fundamental to our democracy. The rest of this news ecosystem wouldn't exist without the work of journalists going out there. And the damage it does, especially to local news, is it's really insidious, right? We rely on that stuff. So, but even good publishers have wrestled with how to attract the viewers and how to attract the dollars. And so that's why you see some pretty popular publishers with big names and big mastheads and big networks and lots of resources sort of debase themselves by going all in on opinion content and clickbait and things of that nature, it may be profitable, it may get an audience, but it doesn't serve the purpose of journalism.
Every time you speak, I have about 17 questions, but Francine, Dr. Francine Hardaway says, yes, it is dead. And I'm actually going to do, she's saying the way we know it, and I'm actually going to do something slightly different, which I've actually never done on one of my shows in 320, which is, Francine, if you're watching, that is the link right now to come onto the show. Francine is a dear friend. She's been a guest on the show before. She's trying to do some interesting things with Substack. She's trying to do some interesting things with NFTs. But if you'd like to ask a question of Vanessa, I would love for you to come on and let's see if that works, if she is still watching. But I think she would bring an amazing point of view to the table. Another thing as well is I've decided I've always been looking for a foil or a muse. I don't even use the word muse to this sound effect. But now I think from this moment on, whenever the word Tucker Carlson is mentioned, we're going to have this is now the Tucker Carlson sound effect. But we'll get to that later. It's funny. I had Dr. Robin DiAngelo on my show, who wrote White Fragility. Mm-hmm. And I asked her a question about comedy. Mm-hmm. And that question was completely taken out of context. And it ended up on Greg Gutfield's show on Fox News. And suddenly I see people are like calling me going, Joe, you're on Fox News. I'm like, hell no, I'll never be on Fox News. And the next thing I see is they're kind of laughing and riffing and taunting and ridiculing. And it was so mean. It was bullying of the highest order or the lowest order in terms of bottom of the barrel. And then I saw all the podcasts picking up on that and riffing and then starting to attack me. And I'm so glad it happened, because I could see how it all unravels. I could see how a line, a comment, a soundbite is picked up and just, and how momentum steamrolls from there. It was kind of like enlightening and yet sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's super disturbing. And that's a show that's like on Fox News channel, right? Like but it's not really a news show. And it's the cable shows. You can watch Fox, CNN, and MSNBC are different gradients of similar formats where it's mostly news and analysis and opinion analysis and opinion content, and sometimes the opinions are very like base level, and they're just mocking and making fun of folks, right? So even within like the opinion category, there are better better supported opinions and worse quality opinions. And I think that, and sometimes when you have like vilification or ad hominem attacks or dehumanization of others, that's in our rating system how we categorize something from not just a mere opinion, but propaganda or unfair persuasion. Those are distinctions that we make. But yeah, you can watch cable news for 4 to 6 hours in the evening and hear maybe 3, 4, 5 actual news stories and 35 to 40 pundits' opinions on them. I mean, it's that I have a saying that junk news is a lot like junk food. And the stuff at the top is the journalism and like facts, that's like your lean proteins and vegetables, and but the stuff that's like cable news is like the donuts and fries of the news media ecosystem. Like, yeah, it's delicious and satisfying, but it's really not that good for you.
So the new tagline will be Fox News makes you fat. I'm just kind of writing that down. TM. But let's get back to the other side for a moment. And I want to be an equal opportunity critic. And in fact, I'm trying to be more and more like that. I think I personally got sucked into the CNN ecosystem, and the outrage that I had, how I joined the likes of Don Lemon every night. And then I tried, by the way, to then watch and move between channels. And I just, it was unwatchable until I realized that Don Lemon himself has become unwatchable. And so now I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do as a consumer because I don't trust CNN. I don't trust Fox News. I don't even trust the fake news anymore in the form of the Daily Show. And especially after both John Oliver and Trevor Noah, I think were exposed for their own bias. So I don't know who to believe. I don't know who to believe anymore. And I feel a little lost, to be honest. What do we do? Who do we turn to? Do we turn to, the middle of the chart, or do we turn to each other?
Well, I think moving higher up on the chart is and closer to the middle. Look, there are left leaning and right leaning sources that are higher for reliability. Okay, so we're not saying that like having a left leaning point of view or advocating for a left leaning point of view or a right leaning point of view is bad. It's just the more it's advocating for a point of view, the less it's news. So I think what's bothering you about watching CNN, prime time, is that it's just so far away from news. It's left-leaning opinion content. That's got to be unsatisfying if you're looking to get informed, right? Of course, you don't trust it. It's super biased. And same thing with Fox. It's like not any better, right? Yeah, they're different degrees. They're not like mirror opposites of each other. They're and it bothers some folks, and some folks think that we're biased because we don't have CNN and Fox News and MSNBC like placed in perfect opposition to each other. There's like dozens of shows on each of those networks, each with different hosts and different makeup of like all of what they cover. There's no way they could be like mirror images of each other in terms of their content, right? But they do have in common is that they inject a lot of opinion, and it's toward one side or the other, and that's frustrating as a news consumer. And I think that the problem is when you're conflating news with opinion or confusing news for opinion. And if that's all you're consuming, it can like really weigh you down, like your emotional. It takes an emotional and mental toll. Yeah, stay with stuff that's up top. I recommend your local news, like local evening news broadcasts. Like, I don't think it's a good idea for people to watch several hours of cable news in the evening. Read your news from some of these print publications. You're going to be in a pretty good spot if that right above that green line, that's our score of 40. That's the most reliable news and analysis in those segments. So there are hundreds and hundreds of news sources that fall in those categories. And if you find yourself like feeling bad and feeling frustrated because of the news content you consume, consider it's because it's not really news content. You're not being informed, you're being entertained, and you're being, manipulated.
Yeah, I mean, there you said it, right? The word manipulated. There are a couple of interesting things, and I'll just kind of I try to make the chart a little bit larger. It's interesting that the New York Times is, I guess, where you would expect it to be. And I say that there's some air quotes. They're the air quotes because it's near the top. It's above the green line. But it certainly has not been labeled as such. It certainly has not. There's been a deliberate attempt to destabilize, to delegitimize, and I'm still left thinking, but is it true? Is it not true? I don't know what to believe anymore. So how do you respond to the fact that there are outlets that are above? I mean, NBC has been lambasted and attacked by Trump and his cronies as well. And I'm trying not to be deliberately biased myself, but there's how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so it comes down to like why do these news sources get the ratings that they get on our chart? Our overall source ratings are made up by representative samples of articles that we rate from these individual sources. So the New York Times, if you go to our website at fontesmedia.com, we have an interactive media bias chart. And if you search New York Times, you'll see a scatter plot of well over 100 news articles that we've rated, and the New York Times placement in the center of that scatter plot, because there are articles. New York Times produces like about 200 or so or more articles per day. That's a lot. I mean, they employ a ton of journalists. Some of the biggest news organizations in the United States are New York Times, Washington Post, AP, and Reuters. They just employ a ton of journalists. So the content that they put out, a large volume of is fact reporting, minimally biased. So it's like going to be towards the top, towards the middle. But then, as you know, they have opinion sections, right? Now they do have some conservative writers, but the majority of the opinion and analysis content is left-leaning analysis and left-leaning opinion. Some of it quite hyperpartisan left, and then you have a smaller sample of right-leaning opinion articles. So when people attack, it's just it's an attack line by mostly right-wing media to say like the mainstream media is biased. Now you have that on the left as well, right? There's attacks on the left from the left. It'll say that the New York Times carries water for the for neoliberal war hawks or whatever. So there's certainly attacks on mainstream media from the left as well, but it's more common and more prevalent to have those right-leaning attacks. And I just would caution folks when one news source is telling you we're right and the other news sources are lying to you like all the time, like take that with a grain of salt, right? So how do you figure out what's true? This is a question I get all the time. Well, when you have to look at the actual claim that's being made on the article that is being discussed. Like you can't just look at one ad hoc example and say, NPR had this big mistake, this faux pas, and therefore like all of NPR is fake news. Like that's that's an argument that doesn't make sense, but people will latch onto that and
Right.
use that to attack it. And so our ratings are not based on these like ad hoc, like, oh, New York Times did a bad thing one time, or the Daily Mail did a bad thing one time. Like the Daily Mail has a low rating because it does like, sketchy things kind of often, right? So we measure how often, the percentages of the articles are that are reliable, that are that are fact reporting. We measure ones that are if that fall short for the good publications, and then we measure the ones that they're publications that consistently churn out misleading and inaccurate content, and that's why their scores are slow.
So maybe a good way to describe that, or to kind of put maybe a bow around it, I should say,
Mhm.
is the fact that your chart is a reflection of fact-based reporting as opposed to opinion
Mhm.
and interpretation. But
Mhm.
I want to ask you a couple of additional questions,
Yeah.
and then I want to get in, maybe change the subject a fair amount, and
Sure.
talk about it. I know a passion of yours, which
Mhm.
is gender equality,
Mhm.
and also the disparity in the VC space, and maybe just in business in general.
Mhm.
First question is, well, first a statement, which is, um, I always use Hannity and Combs as an
Mhm.
example of what we should see more of if, in fact, we're going to be in the opinion business. I wonder why we don't see more of that. And I wonder if maybe there's an opportunity for a network to rise up or to be created that actually, ironically, does deliver on fair and balanced,
Mhm.
and does so in a way where one is not a bully. The Hannity versus Combs, it was never really a fair fight, was it?
Mhm.
So that's just just a statement or a comment
Mhm.
about being able to say maybe the way to fight the tongue is with the tongue,
Mhm.
instead of trying to beat it with the pen or the sword.
Mhm.
So that was just a thought. The other one is,
Yeah.
I mean, feel free to comment on that. But
Yeah.
my
Well,
question to you, well, and yeah, so go for it, and then I'll ask you
yeah,
another question.
there are news sources that are trying to fill this need. Like, going back to the junk food is like junk news analogy. For a long time, when people started realizing that like junk food and processed food is really bad for you, manufacturers of it would just be like, well, that's what people want. So what can we do? Hands are tied. They like fat, salt, and sugar. Also, it's cheaper for us to make it, so we're just going to keep putting it out there. But as consumers started demanding something better for themselves, like some better choices, at least a portion of consumers started demanding it. Then companies started producing it, right? Like we know that there's news that makes us feel better and it keeps us more informed. That's better for us, and some of us are demanding that. And so there are newer news sources that put that out there. Like ProPublica is a great example of a new news source. It's just excellent journalism. There are a number of good newsletters out there that really latch on to providing people, like 1440 is a good example. One like Morning Brew, just like straightforward news that delivered to your inbox. I know there are a number of Substacks that do that as well. News Nation is really trying to fill that space in the cable news space of like there's not the only cable news that really exists right now that's like super popular is partisan opinion stuff. But they're trying to fill that space that's like less biased and more reliable. So there's different. There are people that are trying to fill that space, and I think the more consumers demand it, the more news publishers will say that there's an opportunity here. We can do good and do well. So I hope we see more of that.
Yeah, so do I, and thank you for giving us a little bit of hope as well. Speaking of which, how do we fix CNN? Can CNN be saved? Will CNN Plus be the redemption and savior of CNN?
If it's just more opinion shows. Look, I think it really comes down to the format. Like, why do people trust local news? And why do people trust like ABC, CBS, NBC nightly news? Because the format is delivered. If you listen to those half-hour evening shows, it's 12 or 13 stories delivered quite factually, right, with reporters on scene. That's very different from 4 news stories and 35 pundits in 1 hour on the cable news shows. The format of local news is like, this is what happened in your community. Here's another story of what happened in your community, over and over and over again. That format, like the news reporting format, is like critical to trust. The more opinion you have, the less trust you're going to have. CNN International has an amazing reputation globally, and we don't even see that content here in the United States. It's really hard to find. Like the CNN's, investment in journalists is like all in CNN International, and they have like all this great reputable content that we rate on our chart, and it's much higher than the rest of CNN stuff, right? However, CNN kind of has to make those decisions for themselves. Like they're not asking me. It's cheaper and easier to just instead of like sending reporters, they're a 24-hour cable news network. They could fill 24 hours of news with reporters all across the country, bringing us stories from local communities, national stories, like all kinds of important things. But no, they just like zoom in people into the studio and have them talk about like, what does this next poll mean for the midterm elections? Like, who cares? I get on my soapbox about this.
As you should. Well, look, I'm trying to find, I'm trying to pitch my show to CNN Plus to end up on their network. Should I be doing that, or should I look elsewhere? I'm going to listen to you, Vanessa. I'm going to listen to you.
Look, if it's just again, if it's just a bunch of opinion shows, like it's more of the same. Look, I don't find that the paid news content is usually any better. Like if you pay for like Fox Nation or Blaze TV, it's like extra doses of crazy that you pay for.
Extra doses of crazy is not the mantra or the tagline of this show. To summarize what you said as well, I like the soapbox. I want to give you a chance to talk about another soapbox in a moment.
Yeah.
But what we need is an increased story to pundit ratio. So
yep.
You heard it here. We need more stories, less pundits,
there
and
you
that's
go.
how to fix all of them while there is still time. Let's talk about something that I think is near and dear to your heart. And this is an article. I'm not sure if everyone will be able to see it too clearly, but again, as I said, just lean in as well. But one thing that you wanted to chat about is this idea of gender equality and quite frankly, disparity in the VC space. So stay on the soapbox and talk to us a little bit about this.
Yeah, well, I mean, gender disparities in the workforce have always been a passion of mine. I mean, as an attorney, I was a patent attorney, so and most patent attorneys are engineers. So, engineering is a male-dominated field, law is a male-dominated field, especially the deeper into your career you go. Even though, like the balance in law school is pretty close male-female. And so when I was practicing law, it was really important for me to advocate for things like parental leave policies, which typically affected women's careers. Like the lack of maternity parental leave policies really affect a lot of women and my colleagues. Being able to negotiate for like better pay, like better starting pay. This was not a thing that women, as law students in general, and women especially, were trained to do in law school, and that really bothered me because. And I offered, on LinkedIn, I was like, if you need help negotiating, you should definitely be negotiating your first like lawyer salary. Come talk to me. And I helped like dozens of women negotiate their salaries, and it was just like amazing to me how much work there was to do in that realm. Transition now to this career where Advantage Media is a startup. We have raised some private capital, and we started like it's always been kind of hard to raise money. It's hard to raise the venture capital in general. We're a public benefit corporation. We're not a nonprofit, but we're trying to solve the problems of misinformation and polarization. We're really trying to raise as much of the news landscape as possible. And in order to do that, we just have to grow and in order to meet the scale of that problem. That's why we are pursuing funding. But when I got into this world, I realized that these gender disparities had been like really long standing, even though folks had been trying to address it for a really long time. Like people in the VC community have tried to address these gender disparities for a long time. I mean, the numbers are in the low single digits of like percentage of money that goes toward female-founded companies. I mean, like 2%, 3% in like good years, right? And what I posted the other day on LinkedIn was that Colorado, the state where I live and my company is, all Colorado startups raised $6.5 billion over 448 deals. Separately, in another article, it said that Colorado is ranked the top state for women-led startups for the second consecutive year. So, like, while women made progress, it was only 23 deals, $91 million out of 448 deals, $6.5 billion total for all companies in Colorado. That turned out to be 5.1% of all deals were women-only startup founders. 1.4% of all the capital raised went to women-only startup founders. So that's still like really, really big disparity. And there's like any complex problem. I love complex problems like the media landscape, right? It's not just one solution. It's not just like, let's just do this one thing and it will all be fixed. We need more women entrepreneurs. We need investors of all genders to look at to like create different mental models of what a successful startup can look like. We need male allies who are investors. What's made it possible for my company is to have male investors be our allies because in the VC world, that's who has the power. And in order to change things, you need folks who are in power to participate in that dynamic. So that's what I got to say on the soapbox on that.
Well, if you will allow me to stand on the soapbox with you, I will join you, and I will be certainly, to the best of my ability, one of those male allies. Something that I haven't quite, I don't even remember who said it, but it might have been Pauline Brown, who was on the show, I don't know, a year and a half ago, former chairperson of LVMH. But it was the stat, and I just couldn't delete it from the banners. The rate of women leading companies on the S&P 500 sits at just 6.4%. So I don't know what that number is right now. I even think in the Web3 and the NFT world, it's funny that woman-owned and woman-run projects are getting a lot of love at the moment. But the question, of course, is whether that is just opportunists jumping on or leaning into what they think is going to make them money. But still, it's better than the alternative, which is no woman-run or woman-owned project. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. And as you said, you enjoy complex problems. I guess so do I. But the best way to get to sort them out is to talk about them and talk through them. We have time. We have time, just about time, to hear from Fanzo. And this is his today's Tuesday, and we generally talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And here is his vignette for today.
What's up, friends? Brian Fanzo, iSocial Fans here. And I want to share, I think one of the things that's been fun with the different segments here on the show is really not only hopefully providing a unique perspective, but also driving, conversation that can be had, after the show or really kind of even building on what's, being included here in the show. And I think one of the things that we have to kind of like identify in the space of not only equity and inclusion and not only the importance of diversity, but also the importance of facilitating and having these conversations. And I think when we look at the world around us, it's very easy for us to shy away from difficult conversations or things that we don't understand or that we are confused or overwhelmed by, or where maybe we're even afraid of saying the wrong thing. But I really hope that as we move forward as a culture, as a society, we no longer let that be the excuse or the norm. Because let's face it, our avoidance of these topics, our lack of commitment to growing and learning as humans has got us to the place where we are today, and it is not good enough. And I will, make this argument that it's very easy for us to cast, stones, but it's also very easy for us to belittle someone or to shame them because they're not, bringing these conversations to light in the, quote unquote right way. And I think that's an important aspect of this. And the other importance of this is that just trying isn't good enough. We have to really not only make consistent effort, but in almost every scenario, we need to go over and above and beyond because of the things that have been really installed institutionally in our education system, in our corporate structure, and even in society as a whole that have really are preventing a lot of these changes from ever taking hold. And if we really believe, and I hope to believe that so many people agree that we need to change, that we need to drive awareness and shift this dynamic, it requires an overcalculation to really disrupt the format that has been institutionalized across the board. And that's going to take continuous effort. It's going to take champions that aren't willing to take no for an answer. And it's also going to take each one of us for those scenarios, those one-on-one conversations, maybe the group text message with family or friends from school. And when something is said incorrectly or presented wrong, or a narrative is being displayed, and that it is wrong, or that that is short-sighted or continues the narrative that we're stuck with, it's no longer okay just to stay silent or say, oh, it's just my family group text or just a couple of my friends. Each one of those are opportunities for us to make an impact, to make a difference. And not only do we have to go above and beyond, but it's those small changes. It's standing up in those quiet rooms where maybe there's only one or two others in there. But each time that we do that, it's a slow, hopefully positive step in the right direction. Cheers.
I texted him right now just saying, Fanzo, you crushed it. I also heard from Francine Hardaway, who said she absolutely loves you, Vanessa, and she'll come on another time. I think sometimes we're all tired out of doing too much talking during the day. But what a great way to end the show. Vanessa, if you want to continue to stay close to her and see how she is, as I said, fighting the good fight, there are a variety of ways. She has an amazing podcast, and of course you can subscribe to that. It's called Rating the News. I would imagine most of the news gets a failing grade. Hope springs eternal. So go and search for Rating the News on YouTube. Of course, if you want to find out more about the chart that inspired a company, you can go and check out Adfontes Media, adfontesmedia.com. You can follow them on Instagram, follow them and Vanessa on Twitter. Find out more about whether she's able to push 325 and get a new PR. Please just send us updates, Vanessa. We would love to hear it. And the final thing to say is that this episode is not brought to you by My Pillow. So just want to thank you for coming in. And Chuck Norris, he apparently was not at the January 6th insurrection, although some people thought they saw him. But here's what he had to say about you, Vanessa.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
I'm sure.
I'm sure, exactly. You're like, hell yeah. You're damn right I'm Chuck Norris approved. I will be back tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.